Chapter 2, Lesson 2A. This is in your Indiana Success Book or IN Success Booklet. It is not in your regular Go Math book. So make sure that you have the correct book and you have that A next to your 2.2. This lesson is going to be about adding and subtracting fractions, and our objective is that you will add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. So unlike fractions are fractions with different denominators. To add or subtract unlike fractions, write equivalent fractions using a common denominator or the least common denominator. The LCD is the least common multiple, LCM, of two or more denominators, okay? So LCD is the least common multiple of two or more denominators. So let's look at unlock the problem. The roadrunner of the American Southwest has a tail nearly as long as its body. What is the total length of a roadrunner with a body measuring 5/6 foot and a tail measuring 5/9 foot? First question is, how do you know to add to solve the problem? Okay, so the way we know that is because we were asked to find the total length. So because of that, what is the total length? We know to add those together. So estimate fraction sums. Estimate fraction sums and differences using the closest benchmark, 0, 1/2, or 1. So that's how we're going to estimate, is using those. So it says step 1, use benchmarks to estimate the sum. 5/6 is close to 1 because 5/6 is really close to 6/6. 5/9 is close to 1/2 because 1/2 of 9 is 4.5, and 4.5 is obviously close to 5. So we're going to estimate 1 plus 1/2, which is going to equal 1 and 1/2. So our next step is step 2, and we're going to write equivalent fractions using a common denominator. So you need to think, I can use any common multiple of 6 and 9 for my common denominator. So we have the 5/6, and we know that we can turn that into something with 36 on the bottom because 36 is a multiple of 6 and 9 both. So if I take 6 times 6 to get 36 as my denominator, I have to take the 5 times 6 also to get 30. And then on the second part, we have 5/9, which equals 5 times something and 9 times something to get 36 as my denominator. So 9 times 4 is 36. So then I have to take 5 times 4 also, which equals 20. Okay, now moving on to step 3. Step 3 is to add the numerators and then write the sum over the common denominators. So when we did when we redid these fractions, we decided the numerators were 30 over 36. So we changed the first fraction to, and then the second one we said was 20, 36. So now we're going to add the numerators, which is that top number. So 30 plus 20 is 50. But then we write the sum over the common denominator. We do not add these denominators. We just keep that the same. So now we have 50 36. And step 4 is to find or use the GCF to write the sum in simplest form. So the greatest common factor of 50 and 36 is 2. So we're going to divide them both by 2. 50 divided by 2 is 25. And 36 divided by 2 is 18. But now we need to write it in simplest form. 25 goes into 18 one time. And when we do that, if we take 25 minus 18, we get 7. So there's 7/18 remaining. So compare your answer to your estimate. Our estimate was 1.5. Our answer was 1 7/18, which is pretty close to 1.5. So we think that is reasonable. So to rename a fraction greater than 1 as a mixed number, divide the numerator by the denominator and use the remainder as the numerator and the divisor as the denominator. So that's what I did with that mixed number. So we just took 25 divided by 18, which gave us 1. Our remainder was 7. Example 2, we're going to use the LCD, which is the least common denominator, to find 7/12 minus 1/3. So step 1 is to write an equivalent fraction using LCD. So we're going to take 7/12 and we're going to figure out what 1/3 turns into with 12. So to get to 12, we need to take 3 times something. 3 times 4 equals 12. And then 1 times 4, because if we do it to the denominator, we need to do it to the numerator. So 1 times 4 is 4. So 1/3 equals 4/12. Step 2 is to subtract the numerators. Don't subtract fractions. It just says the numerator. So we're going to take 4/12 and we're going to subtract that from 7/12. So 7 minus 4 is 3. And then we leave the denominator the same. So we now have 3/12. And now we're going to use the GCF to write the difference in simplest form. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So 1/4. So 7/12 minus 1/3 is 1/4. Error alert over here. Make sure you multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the same factor to find an equivalent fraction. So right here, they have to be the same. You cannot take the first one and multiply it by something different than the denominator. And our last example, example 2, says evaluate 2/3 plus h for h equals 2/5. Do not overthink this. Okay, you're just plugging h equals in for h. So we're replacing h with 2/5. So instead of 2/3 plus h, we now have 2/3 plus 2/5. So we're going to write equivalent fractions using the least common denominator, which if I look at 3 and 5, I already know 3 times 5 is 15. So I'm going to do that. So 3 times 5 is 15. So 2/3 becomes 10/15 plus 2/5, but we need to turn that into 15ths. So 5 times 3 gave me 15. So 2 times 3, which is 6. Now I'm going to add 10/15 plus 6/15. So then I take 10/15 plus 6/15. So then I'm going to add the numerators, which is 16. Keep the denominator the same, which is 15. 16 divided by 15 is going to be 1, with 1/15 remaining. So 2/3 plus h for h equals 2/5 is 16/15, or 1 1/15. Again, this was Indiana's Success 2.2a, and our objective was that you will add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators.